Nobody puts baby in a corner. Dirty Dancing wasn't just a romantic dance flick. It was a cultural rebellion wrapped in forbidden love and sweaty rehearsals. What audiences saw on screen was smooth, graceful, and intoxicating. But behind the cameras, chaos brewed, injuries, casting nightmares, and near disasters that almost killed the film before it reached theaters. Today, we're revealing 20 weird facts about Dirty Dancing you didn't know. From Patrick Swayze's brutal injuries to studio executives ready to bury the film, the truth is wilder than anything that made it to the big screen. And stay tuned for the bonus fact, a hidden secret about this movie that will completely change how you see it. Now let's dive in, because this isn't just nostalgia. It's the untold story of a film that shouldn't have worked, but somehow became immortal. Patrick Swayze's knee nearly ended production. When Patrick Swayze stepped into Johnny Castle's leather jacket, he brought raw charisma, but also a secret liability. His knee had been shattered years earlier during a football injury. On set, long rehearsals and high-impact lifts left him in agony. Crew members recall him icing the swollen joint between takes, determined not to show weakness. At one point, doctors advised him to stop dancing altogether. He refused, gritting his teeth through every scene. The now iconic lake lift? It was filmed in freezing temperatures, worsening his injury. What audiences didn't see was the sheer pain behind his effortless moves. It wasn't just acting. It was endurance, grit, and stubbornness that turned Swayze into the legend audiences remember. Without his refusal to quit, Dirty Dancing might never have reached the finish line. Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze's explosive feud. On-screen, Baby and Johnny sizzled with chemistry. Off-screen, Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze clashed relentlessly. Their working relationship was strained, with Swayze reportedly frustrated by Grey's need for repeated takes and her emotional approach to acting. Grey, in turn, found him arrogant and intense. The tension was so bad during rehearsals that director Emile Ardolino considered recasting. But when the cameras rolled, that friction translated into electricity. Their chemistry wasn't about harmony. It was about sparks flying from two actors barely tolerating each other. Ironically, the very friction that made filming miserable gave the movie its unforgettable energy. What audiences perceived as sexual tension was, in many ways, real conflict playing out in front of the lens. Not love, not hate, something sharper, stranger, and perfect for the story. The studio tried to kill the movie. Believe it or not, Vestron Pictures, the small distributor that backed Dirty Dancing, had little faith in the film. Early test screenings went badly, with audiences mocking its title and dismissing it as a cheap teen movie. Executives debated burying it with a straight-to-video release. One producer recalled an executive saying, "Burn the negatives and collect the insurance." Instead, a limited theatrical run was attempted. Then something unexpected happened. Word of mouth exploded. Audiences returned again and again, dragging friends with them. In just weeks, it went from near obscurity to a box office juggernaut. The film that executives wanted dead became one of the biggest hits of 1987. It wasn't corporate calculation. It was the audience refusing to let it fail. The famous lift was only practiced once. The lake lift scene has become cinema history. But here's the kicker. It was only rehearsed once before filming. Jennifer Grey was terrified of being dropped, so she avoided practicing the lift in rehearsals. When cameras rolled, it was do or die. In freezing water, with mud sucking at their legs, Swayze hoisted Grey above his head in a single, triumphant shot. What you see in the film is the raw first attempt. The trembling arms, the nervous laughter, the sheer risk. That authenticity is why the moment feels so magical. It wasn't polished perfection. It was uncertainty captured forever. Not choreography, but instinct. A gamble that became the beating heart of Dirty Dancing. The setting was freezing cold, not summer heat. Dirty Dancing is set in the sweltering summer of 1963. In reality, it was filmed in Virginia and North Carolina during autumn. The mountain resort looked warm, but the air was biting cold. Actors shivered through their costumes, pretending to sweat under the lights. The lake scene? Shot in October, when water temperatures dropped so low that Grey's lips turned blue. Crew members recall hiding heaters just out of frame, but the chill was unavoidable. Extras wrapped in blankets between takes while the camera crew fought foggy lenses from the temperature difference. What looks like carefree summer heat was actually brutal endurance against the cold. It wasn't comfort, it was survival, and it shows just how convincing the cast really was. The resort almost became the star. Kellerman's, the fictional Catskills resort, feels like a living character in Dirty Dancing. But here's the twist. The film wasn't shot in New York at all. Instead, production took over the Mountain Lake Lodge in Virginia and Lake Lure in North Carolina. The lodge was so remote that cast and crew were housed on site, creating a kind of real resort life where tensions and friendships intensified. The location brought authenticity, but also headaches. Equipment had to be trucked in through winding mountain roads. Weather shifted rapidly, forcing last-minute reshoots. Even so, the lodge itself became a pilgrimage site after the movie's success. Fans still flock there today, reenacting Baby's dance lessons in the very ballroom where Swayze once commanded the floor. The setting wasn't just a backdrop, it became part of the movie's eternal myth. A shoestring budget created. Genius. Dirty Dancing was made for just $6 million, a fraction of typical Hollywood budgets at the time. This forced the filmmakers into creative decisions that became legendary. Costumes were mostly vintage finds or sewn on the cheap. Extras were often locals recruited on the spot. The low-budget look actually enhanced the nostalgic 1963 setting, grounding the story in realism. Even the famous watermelon scene, where Baby awkwardly carries the oversized fruit, wasn't carefully staged. It was improvised because the crew only had access to a few props. What executives dismissed as cheap became authentic charm. The tight budget turned restrictions into strengths. Instead of gloss, the movie delivered grit, sweat, and honesty. Not Hollywood perfection, but something closer to memory. Messy, imperfect, unforgettable. The abortion storyline almost got cut. For a romantic dance film in the 1980s, Dirty Dancing made a radical choice. It included an abortion subplot. Penny's secret pregnancy and the dangerous operation she undergoes brought raw realism to what could have been a glossy fantasy. But studio executives panicked. They pressured director Emil Ardolino and writer Eleanor Bergstein to remove the abortion entirely. Bergstein fought back, arguing it was central to the story's stakes and Baby's transformation. Without it, she insisted, there was no reason for Johnny and Baby's bond to matter. Against the odds, she won. The abortion storyline stayed, and critics later praised it as one of the boldest, most honest elements of the film, not a side plot. The emotional engine that made the romance resonate. Patrick Swayze hated, saying the iconic line, "Nobody puts Baby in a corner." It's the line audiences cheer for, the defining declaration of the film. But Patrick Swayze hated it. He thought it was corny, even begging to change or cut it. Director Emil Ardolino insisted it stay, believing it was the perfect emotional climax. Reluctantly, Swayze delivered the line, but with little faith it would work. Decades later, he admitted he was wrong. The line became a cultural touchstone, quoted in commercials, parodies, and even political speeches. What Swayze saw as cheesy dialogue turned into movie immortality. It wasn't just a line. It was the exclamation mark that transformed Johnny from a troubled outsider into a hero, proof that sometimes what actors resist most becomes their legacy. The film's soundtrack revived a whole genre. Here's where you pause, because if you've made it this far, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next facts will blow your mind. The Dirty Dancing soundtrack was more than just background. It was a revolution. Mixing 1960s classics with brand new songs, it bridged two eras. At first, executives doubted it would sell. But when "I've Had the Time of My Life" hit the airwaves, everything changed. The track skyrocketed to #1, won an Oscar, and swept the Grammys. Meanwhile, oldies like "Be My Baby" and "Hungry Eyes" returned to radio playlists, sparking a nostalgia wave. The soundtrack sold over 30 million copies worldwide, becoming one of the best-selling albums of all time. It didn't just accompany the movie. It resurrected doo-wop and Motown for a new generation, not background music, a cultural earthquake in its own right. Jennifer Grey almost didn't get the role. Jennifer Grey wasn't the studio's first pick for Baby. Other actresses auditioned, including Sarah Jessica Parker and Winona Ryder, but director Emil Ardolino insisted on chemistry, not just looks. Grey initially resisted because she thought the role seemed too sweet for her edgy sensibilities. During her screen test with Patrick Swayze, sparks flew, but not the good kind. They argued, rolled their eyes, and left the audition room frustrated. But when the producers watched the footage, they saw something different. Real, unfiltered energy. That mix of annoyance and attraction was exactly what Baby and Johnny's relationship needed. Grey got the role, reluctantly at first, not realizing she'd be tied to Baby Houseman forever. Sometimes casting isn't about perfect harmony. It's about finding friction that ignites on screen. Patrick Swayze wrote part of the soundtrack. Patrick Swayze wasn't just Johnny Castle the dancer, he was also part of the soundtrack. His ballad She's Like the Wind, co-written years earlier, was originally meant for a different movie. But when producers were looking for filler tracks, Swayze suggested it. To everyone's surprise, the song not only made the cut, it became a Billboard hit, climbing into the top 10. Audiences didn't just swoon over Johnny's moves, they unknowingly fell for Swayze's voice on the radio. It wasn't just a dance movie anymore. It was also a personal musical contribution from its star. For Swayze, who once dreamed of a singing career, it was vindication. He wasn't just carrying the film on screen, his voice was haunting it off-screen too. The film sparked unexpected political debate. When Dirty Dancing premiered, critics quickly zeroed in on its abortion subplot, sparking heated debate. Conservative groups attacked the film for sneaking politics into a romance, while progressive voices praised it for handling the issue with unusual candor. For a low-budget dance movie, it suddenly found itself in the middle of a culture war. Eleanor Bergstein, the writer, later admitted she was stunned at the backlash, but also proud. She had based Penny's story on her own lived memories of the 1960s, when illegal abortions were common and dangerous. What began as a love story became, unintentionally, a flashpoint for conversations about women's rights. The controversy didn't kill the movie, it amplified it. Suddenly, Dirty Dancing wasn't just a guilty pleasure, it was a statement. Jennifer Grey's age shocked audiences. Jennifer Grey played an innocent 17-year-old baby, but in reality, she was 26 during filming. The age gap between actress and character was wide, but Grey's expressive vulnerability sold it. Fans were shocked when they learned the truth, because she convincingly captured the awkwardness of adolescence. Grey later admitted that playing younger forced her to strip away vanity, leaning into her natural shyness. The irony? Patrick Swayze, her older love interest, was only about 6 years older in real life. Hollywood has a long history of miscasting ages, but in Dirty Dancing, the gamble worked. Grey wasn't a teenager, but she understood the uncertainty of first love so well that audiences believed every second. It wasn't about years, it was about emotional truth. The training scenes were totally real. The montage where Baby struggles through dance rehearsals, collapsing in frustration, laughing nervously, clashing with Johnny wasn't staged. Jennifer Grey really was exhausted and irritated with Patrick Swayze. Director Emile Ardolino chose to keep cameras rolling through the chaos, capturing her raw reactions. When Grey giggled during serious moments or flinched at Swayze's touch, that wasn't acting. It was genuine tension. What audiences saw as character development was, in fact, the real relationship between two actors bleeding onto film. It blurs the line between performance and reality. Those sweaty training sequences weren't just scripted hardship, they were lived hardship. And that authenticity is why the montage feels alive, not polished choreography, but two human beings struggling to connect under pressure. The film nearly got an R rating. Dirty Dancing walks the line between sweet romance and provocative storytelling. But during post-production, the studio panicked about the risque dance sequences and Penny's abortion subplot. The Motion Picture Association of America, MPAA, initially flagged it for an R rating. That rating would have crippled its box office, keeping away the teenage audience it was courting. Producers scrambled, trimming some of the most suggestive shots and toning down dialogue. In the end, the film secured a PG-13 rating, just lenient enough to attract teens while keeping its edge. Ironically, the controversy helped the movie stand out in 1987's crowded marketplace. Not safe, but not scandalous either. A perfect balance that allowed it to thrive across generations. Without those last-minute edits, Dirty Dancing might have been locked away as an adults-only curiosity. Patrick Swayze insisted on doing his own stunts. When it came to the dancing, Swayze refused to let a double step in. Every lift, every spin, every dangerous move was his own body on the line. The lake scene was particularly brutal, freezing cold with slippery rocks underfoot. Crew members begged to use stand-ins, but Swayze insisted. He wanted authenticity, even at the risk of injury. His dedication impressed the cast, but terrified the producers, who worried a single accident could shut down production. Years later, dancers praised Swayze's technique, saying he moved with the discipline of a professional. Not a stunt double, not camera tricks, just sheer physical commitment. That stubborn pride gave Johnny Castle credibility. You weren't watching an actor pretending. You were watching Patrick Swayze live and bleed for the role. Eleanor Bergstein based the story on her life. Screenwriter Eleanor Bergstein didn't pull Dirty Dancing from thin air. Baby Houseman was, in many ways, her alter ego. She grew up in a Jewish family, spent summers at Catskills resorts, and, yes, was nicknamed Baby. Her memories of social dancing, class divides, and youthful rebellion formed the skeleton of the script. Even the abortion subplot came from stories she'd witnessed firsthand in the 1960s. Bergstein later said the film was her attempt to capture a vanished world, a time before the 1960s counterculture, when change was simmering just beneath the surface. What audiences saw wasn't just fantasy. It was history refracted through one woman's memory. That's why the movie resonates. It feels lived in, personal, authentic. Not fiction, but memoir disguised as romance. The movie won an Oscar against all odds. Few believed Dirty Dancing would win awards, but its theme song, "I've Had the Time of My Life," stunned everyone by taking home the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Singer Bill Medley almost refused to record it, worried it would flop. Instead, it became a cultural anthem, played at weddings, proms, and celebrations worldwide. The Oscar win gave the low-budget underdog a legitimacy that even critics couldn't ignore. A movie dismissed as teen fluff now stood among Hollywood's giants. The irony? The film wasn't supposed to last more than a few weeks in theaters, yet its music and that golden statue ensured it would live forever. Not a disposable hit. A piece of cinematic history carved into the Academy's record books. The film inspired a global dance craze. After its release, Dirty Dancing sparked a worldwide obsession with partner dancing. Studios saw a surge in dance class enrollments. Resorts offered Johnny and Baby weekends, where couples could learn the famous lift. Even countries where ballroom dancing had faded saw revivals. The movie's impact wasn't limited to pop culture. It reshaped physical culture. Movement, intimacy, and rhythm became a shared language again. Eleanor Bergstein later said she was overwhelmed by letters from fans who credited the film with rekindling marriages, inspiring careers, or simply giving them courage to dance. What began as a small-budget project turned into a global phenomenon. Not just a movie, but a movement. Proof that art can ripple far beyond the screen, changing real lives in unexpected ways. The original ending was completely different. Here's the shocker, the final. Dance number, the soaring lift, the anthem blasting. It almost never existed. The original ending was scripted as a quiet resolution, with Baby's father apologizing and Johnny leaving the resort alone. No triumphant dance, no declaration in the corner, just bittersweet closure. But in editing, the filmmakers realized the movie needed a catharsis. They rewrote the climax, adding the dance number that became iconic. And they stitched together the footage almost improvisationally, relying on raw rehearsal takes. That last-minute pivot didn't just save the film, it gave audiences one of cinema's most euphoric endings. Without it, Dirty Dancing would have faded quietly. With it, it became immortal. Not just a story of love, a story of liberation through movement. Dirty Dancing wasn't supposed to work. It was too small, too risky, too messy, and yet it defied every odds stacked against it. Injuries turned into triumphs. Studio interference became resilience. A forgotten resort transformed into holy ground. More than 3 decades later, it endures, not as a guilty pleasure, but as a cultural landmark. If this deep dive pulled back the curtain for you, hit like, subscribe, and drop your favorite Dirty Dancing memory in the comments. Because in the end, nobody puts this movie, or its fans, in a corner.